So I took a little bit of a lunch break with my buddy Tom, and so I'm starting the project a little bit later than I expected. I've just finished doing the tiling. I needed to lay a couple pieces of tile that had a microfracture in them, which didn't show up till we grouted. So that's fixed. Those are setting. We'll be able to regrout them tomorrow. In fact, we have to wait till tomorrow because that's when we're going to pick up the grout. Anyway, these things happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start measuring up the piece for the transition, and I'm just going to go and take a look at my previous transition to make sure that I have all of the offsets that I want so it'll look consistent. And then I'm going to come down here and start marking up my piece of maple and start carving it on the table saw. So I took some measurements upstairs and found out that on the highest side I was 3/8 of an inch height above the floor. That's what I'm going to aim for here. It allowed me on the other side to be a little under 1/4 inch, and I'm hoping to be a little tighter than that in this one, but we'll see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the I've just got my 2-foot level here so I can have a straight edge and I can see what's going to happen in terms of how level this is going to be. But you can see the gap. I'm going to clean that out, and that's where I will glue everything down to. And this way the transition should fit right underneath the door, so you shouldn't see it from either side. It should just look like a wall or floor going under the door. And I have a piece of stock here that's 3/8 inches thick, so I'm going to use that to be able to go alongside and use my little depth measurer here to take some measurements and figure out exactly how tall I'm going to make this and construct all the or gather all the numbers I need to mark up the board so that I can cut it up, and then we'll take it out to the table saw and we'll start to cut it up. So I made a few chicken scratches onto a piece of paper. I determined that on one side, if I make it 3/8 up from the wood floor, then I get away with 3/16 on the tile side to get a nice snug fit. So I'm going to do that. It needs to be at least 11/16 deep, so I'll have plenty of material. I'll cut the top and then I'll chamfer the sides, but then what I'll do is I'll trim the bottom to the depth that I need once I've cut and finished the top part. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in 1/2 inch on either side of the gap, and if I do a 5/16 gap in there, it'll fit in there quite snugly, and it will cover over some of the ugly bits of the tile and fit in there quite nicely. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go to the table saw. So I'm quite aware that my workshop is an absolute mess right now. We've been working on this basement project for quite a while, and in the cold weather, this workshop has just been reconfigured and things thrown in here to get them out of the workspace when we're done with them. So this is normally a much more organized space, and in fact, I wouldn't have lumber over on the other side. I'd have a car in there. We're going to set all that up this summer and fix everything up. At least that's the goal. But what I wanted to do was just kind of explain the mess. I'm going to set up my feather board so that I can make sure that the wood is snug. First I'm going to cut it for width, and then we'll make sure that it's snug when I'm cutting the T section on the top. So if you remember, I said the wood here was corrugated on the bottom, and so I need to account for that so that I make sure that the high point here is actually what's going to be underneath the middle. And I'm going to want to cut off the edges because this is a piece of flooring. But it's long enough, and I have enough space to carve out what I need. So now I have my piece that's 1 inch and 5/16 in width, and I can begin carving it. So I'm going to have to take some other measurements to set the saw blade. I'm going to go in like this first, and then I will come in on this side and carve out my little rabbits on either side of it. And this piece is left over. I might be able to do something else with that a little bit later. So I've installed my feather board onto the table saw. I have it, it guides right in this rail. What this will allow me to do is to hold the wood up close against the fence so that I won't have any kind of wobble, but I'll be able to get a consistent cut. It'll also help me hold things in place, so I'll just be able to do downward pressure using the push stick and everything will be safe. So I need to set the blade depth and make sure that everything is fine there. So what I did was I took a test strip, it's just a piece of MDF I had lying around the shop, and I used it to make an initial cut. That way I could see how accurate my measurements were, because this table saw is not the most accurate thing. And so once I get it tweaked and locked into place, it does work well. So I've managed on the second cut to get the right depth and the right distance here so that I'll be able to do my lip. And then I'll be able to cut out that piece quite easily with the saw coming from the other angle. So I'm going to actually make the cut on the actual piece of wood now, making sure that the laminate side is the one that I'm cutting first. Because I already had the depth of the blade set up the way I wanted it, because it's the same depth on both sides, I needed to, should I cut the right side? Yeah, I did. I needed to set the distance from the fence. Now what I need to do is I need to adjust the feather board so that it's set up for this board rather than for my test strip that was just a piece of MDF. I ended up using two pieces because it's a little tricky finagling trying to get the right distance. This should slide in here nicely, and I will put on my safety gear. And so if you look at the end, you'll see that I've cut it. One side is quite a bit higher than the other. Once it's all rounded off and set into place, it should be fine. This is the same. The big side is the same height as I have coming in from the living room, and I don't really notice that it doesn't pose a tripping hazard. But that gives me my oh, this end seems like it was coming up a bit. Hopefully that was just at the end of the cut. Oh yeah, it came up quite a bit. I might run that through again. Make sure I haven't messed it all up, but this is a problem with my eyes. Okay, so that's 3/16. That's what I want. This should be a 1/2 inch. About a 1/2 inch. The 1/2 inch. Okay. No, that looks good. So now I just need to take out kind of the rabbits, and I will be ready to do all the finishing touches to this. You'll notice it's hardwood, so the blade is going to burn it on the side, but that'll all come off when I sand it all up and make it look nice. So I have cut out pieces that don't need. This one here is a little, I have to take a little bit of a chisel to that, get that out, just clean it up a little bit. So I have my chop saw set up down here, and I wanted to try just to see if I could do a little bit of this by hand. I have another piece that I'm going to use as my experimental piece, and I'm going to get my sanding tools. I'm going to go grab my fine carpentry toolbox, and I'll be right back. So I cleaned up the rabbets with my chisel, and so I'm going to take a plane, chamfer this edge, and then I will sand it. I just want it to be kind of rounded over, and I want to give it a good sanding on all the parts that will be visible. And then I'm going to cut it to length to fit it into the space. So it's not a long process to cut one of these, and it's kind of fun actually. So I've put a little bit of a micro bevel on the edge, and I'm going to use my mouse to sand it up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually sand it up using progressively higher grits, which makes the paper finer, which will give me a smoother and smoother finish. Whereas the higher grits, I'll start at a 60. I probably should start at an 80, but I don't have an 80 handy. I have a 60 handy, but I'll work my way up to a 240, which will give me a nice smooth finish. And then I can cut it to length and install this bad boy. Here we go. Oh, that's everywhere. So using the, let me just knock this down a little bit here. So just using the 60 grit allowed me to get all of the burning off and to round over that micro bevel. I might work a little bit more on this one here, but then I'm going to go to probably 160 and then 240, and that should be good enough. I'll cut it to size. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some rub-on poly, probably put about 3 coats, maybe 4 coats on there, so it'll yellow up eventually. Probably not so much in the basement, but at least get that. I'm using the rub-on that actually will yellow a little bit because the laminate in here has some yellowing. It's maple, well, it's maple laminate in it, but it's got that nice yellowing. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll show you when I get it all smooth. Okay, I cut one side already, and so that's the side I cut. So just a little bit 2 foot and a little bit more than a quarter. Start off with. So we're still cleaning up that edge. See this one? So close, so close. Okay, so I did manage to cut the piece, and well, it looks okay. However, the problem is that it's not wide enough. So I just barely cover things, and if you notice, the distance in the door on the frame is not equal. And that's because I had to push it in to try and cover over some of the ugly bits on the tiles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recut it. I won't show that whole process because I'm probably not going to do it today, and I'd like to put up this video. But what I'll do is I'll make it about a 1/4 inch wider on each side, so that the T will come out a little bit more. It will cover up nicely, and I'll be able to line it up in the door frame properly. But that's essentially how you build one of these, or cut one of these transition strips. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the process. Thanks for watching.